Hey, this week I'm gonna be making the Rat King from the IDW comics, and I have a body gun that I got off Amazon, and I think it's perfect for this guy because he's like lanky and have a good base to work with. But I start by sketching out the face a little and then drilling nostrils because he's got some big rat nostrils. I don't know, that's how he looks. And then I move on to some green stuff to build out his eyeballs, and I'm going to build his nose and his teeth and his ears a bit. And that's going to take 24 hours to dry, but I just want to get the base of his kind of bone structure, and I give him a bit of an extra chin as well. And then I move on to Milliput, which is another epoxy putty, but it's thinner and softer, and I'm using that to build up his skin pretty much over top of the structure I already did with the green stuff. But the green stuff sticks better, but with a little water the Milliput blends together better. So they both have their qualities that I like about them. And I build out the ears a little more, and now I'm building out his pants, and those are going to be thicker and baggier, but he's going to have wraps on his feet and his arms and other places that I didn't build out. But now I moved to gray primer. It's white acrylic primer and a little bit of black acrylic, just because the pants I want to finish before I go on to the jacket, because they're going to be getting smudged if I don't finish them first, and they'll be harder to get to because part of them will be underneath the jacket. But after I do my first primer coat, I can see where there are extra like cracks and gaps that I want to fill, and I use spackling to fill those. That only takes like 15 to 20 minutes to dry, and I can sand it. The Milliput takes like 3 to 4 hours to dry, and if you wait like an hour and a half, it's pretty hard that you're not going to mess it up, and you can add more and still use water to blend it together, which I'm going to do later when I start the jacket. But I do another coat of the gray primer on the pants, and now I'm covering everywhere I just painted with matte acrylic varnish. That's going to help seal it up, because when I move on to the next step of the pants, which is using a Sharpie fine liner to draw the pinstripes on the pants, but I had a bad marker, and this marker is also bad, so my lines came out pretty bad. But when I found one that worked, Sharpie fine liner, it made much straighter lines. Then I let that dry for a little while, and I cover that with the matte acrylic varnish, because the ink from the marker will smudge if I touch it. I move on to his flute that he has, and I just made that out of the Milliput, just putting a strip over a toothpick and then drilling holes in it where I wanted the holes. I painted his eyes red, bright red was the red, and now using some white on his teeth, get those ready, and I dry brushed a little bit of daffodil yellow on the teeth because I want them to be kind of grimy and dirty. Then I moved to parchment for his skin tone, because he's got a really pale complexion, and parchment just is the right off-white for that particular project. So now I start on the jacket, and I start on the bottom, and I put some parchment paper on his leg there so that it won't stick to the joints that move the leg, because otherwise they'd be stuck. I want them to still be able to move and twist, and they won't be able to do the splits anymore, but he still has good rotation and stuff on his legs. And I'm doing this piece by piece because I don't want to smudge anything, or it's hard to work with it when it's wet and where to hold it and stuff, so I do it in sections and it's easier to work with. But I'm building out the bottom of his jacket now, again using the parchment paper, but wait till it's fully dry before you remove the parchment paper, otherwise you'll mess up whatever you did previously. And so just building a little bit at a time till I get the jacket where I want it. And I use some little silver beads to make the buttons. And this is a rat, part of a rat nunchucks that Raphael from the 90s came with. for some reason. He had a thing spinning on his back, but that was a broken one. There was only one rat when there should have been two. So I sanded part of the tail down and I sanded part of the jacket just to thin it up a bit. Now any cracks or gaps in the jacket I'm filling with spackling, and then if I wet my finger a little I can just smooth over the spackling and it'll be nice and smooth. Yeah. Then I add a little bit of spackling on the end of his tail to make his tail longer and let that dry. And I move on to painting black acrylic primer on the fife and his jacket, and his boots are going to be black. I took off the hands to make it easier to paint the jacket, and I give him some eyebrows with that paint. And now I'm doing matte acrylic varnish over everywhere I just painted so I can work with it and it won't smudge. And now I'm painting him after I sanded the tail a little bit of the spackling that I had added on. Paint him gray, and then I paint the fife gold, and now I'm using hockey tape for his wraps, and I have a wrap that went around his neck that's more of a scarf, but it's made out of the wraps that he wears. And I left the stomach part open. I can't put as much as I'd like for wraps there because I want to keep all his movements. Then I drilled 3 holes in the back of his head, and I have a thin craft wire that I'm using pieces of to have something for his hair to sit on so it doesn't all just sag down while it's drying. And then I start with his sideburns and then blend those together on the back of his head, and then use little pieces of the Milliput is what I'm still using, just to wrap around the metal pieces and to add strands and strands to his hair. And then I use the tool there to add some lines to it to make it look more like hair. Now I'm using the gray on the bottom of his hair just so it'll be a little darker on the bottom than the top, because I had it out to paint the other rat because I had some Milliput left over and I decided it was the right size to make a little rat. I used a wild saffron for his hair. I wanted that to be a bright orange. And now I'm covering all the tape with the matte acrylic varnish to get it ready for gray wash. And then I used my Sharpie fine liner, the working one, to do eyes and the nose on the 2 mice that I have there. And now I'm using, it's a Vallejo gray primer, and I'm just covering him with that so the wraps will be gray and then in his hair has more definition. And that's what it looks like. It's hard because the teeth are so close to the skin color, but that's what it looks like. I had forgot to do the straps across his chest, so I did those off camera after I thought I was done everything. But that's that, and until next time, next week, remember, always keep your head up. Peace.